Ladies and gentlemen, on today's show, we're interviewing the nationwide radio show host, Charlie Kirk. Yes, Charlie Kirk, the best-selling author of the book, The MAGA Doctrine. If you love these United States and the freedoms that this great country provides us, you absolutely are going to love Charlie Kirk. You see, Charlie Kirk has researched the Founding Fathers, the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and all the thought leaders, all of the books that influenced the making of this great United States. A lot of people don't realize how much thought went into planning the creation of this republic. And Charlie Kirk has invested the time needed to become an expert in what makes America great. And he actually teamed up with President Donald J. Trump himself to host a massive rally in Arizona this year. This guy, Charlie Kirk, is loved by the president. He's loved by the Thrive Nation. And I know you're going to love this interview as we interview the great one, Charlie Kirk.
Some shows don't need a celebrity narrator to introduce the show, but this show does. 2 men, 8 kids, co-created by 2 different women, 13 multi-million-dollar businesses. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Thrive Time Show.
Now, 3, 2, 1, here we go!
Started from the bottom, now we here. Started from the bottom, and we'll show you how to get here. Started from the bottom, now we here. Started from the bottom, now we here. Started from the bottom, now we
Yes, and yes! Thrive Nation, we are in the air everywhere, and on today's show, we're interviewing a freedom-loving, Jesus-loving, unapologetic American, the best-selling author of the MAGA Doctrine, Charlie Kirk. Welcome on to the Thrive Time Show. How are you, sir?
Thank you. That was probably the most epic, dramatic intro I've ever seen of anything in the history of civilization.
Oh, that's impressive. Okay, I'll work on it. I need more alacrity.
I heard Morgan Freeman. I heard all sorts of things. I'm still trying to process all of that. I don't know if you hired Morgan Freeman to do your intro or how that all worked, but impressive.
Well, I appreciate that. Now, I want to ask you this because we faithfully listen to you on the way to church. That's how the Clark family consumes Charlie Kirk. On the way to church, we listen. We go to Guts Church, a mega church in Tulsa. We go there, Pastor Bill Scheer. And what I love about you is that there is a deeper meaning for why you love our country. You believe that we get our unalienable rights from God. The Constitution was created to uphold those rights, and then governments are instituted amongst men to protect those rights. Can you walk us through, because you're so articulate? I just want to start there at the rock. Where do we get our freedoms from, my friend?
Well, we get our rights from God, and this is not a simple conclusion. This was wrestled with for thousands of years, during some of the Old Testament biblical period. Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle really wrestled with these ideas of what are rights and who creates people, and if they're created, are they created in God's image? And the Bible clarified all of that very nicely, specifically in the New Testament. And then for many hundreds of years, as civil government was being created all across Europe and across many other continents, still governments were kind of the formation of governments was still missing the big question, which is, who are you in the state of nature, and what rights do you have that predate government? So, for example, if I just dropped off your entire family in the middle of Saskatchewan, Canada, who are you? Outside of everything that you might own or everything that you might know to be true. And you'd say, well, I have the right to speak to each other. I have my own rights, my ideas. I have a right to own property. I have a right to be able to flourish. I have a right to protect myself against threats. I have the right to family formation. And then if you have those rights, which we call natural rights, who gives you those rights? And this is where John Locke came in. And John Locke believed in something called tabula rasa, which means a blank slate. We don't necessarily believe this as Christians, but Locke did a lot of other pioneer work, specifically when it came to where rights came from. And he did believe that God was the grantor of rights.
Now, John Locke, who was John Locke? Just kind of a third grade level. I have to assume that our 500,000 listeners, a lot of them are business owners, and maybe they aren't familiar with some of these names. Who was John Locke?
So John Locke was a Scottish philosopher that predated the American Revolution. He was one of 3 social contract theorists. So there are 3 main people who really built out the idea of a social contract. The first of which was a man named Thomas Hobbes.
Yeah.
He wrote a book called The Leviathan. He believed that people and humanity in the state of nature were nasty, brutish, and short.
Wow.
We as Christians actually will sympathize with that. That's actually very much how we would view original sin. He used a much more humanistic type interpretation, and he came from the English Civil War. So every philosopher is always a byproduct of the times they lived in and the times that they were contesting in, right? So what they saw, what they were living through very much impacted their philosophy. The second social contract theorist was a man by the name of Jean-Jacques Rousseau.
Ooh.
He was a French philosopher. He was a fool, but he was very influential. He valued the primitive over the civilized. He valued the infant over the adult. And he thought that we must break ourselves of the shackles of decent society, or what we would call decent society. He actually thought that people were perfect in the state of nature. Incorruptible is the word that he would use. He used a French word for it. And that everything around us, our poor planning, our indulgence in private property actually makes us flawed, right?
Wow.
So he thinks that we were good in the state of nature. Hobbes thought we were bad in the state of nature. John Locke thought that we were blank in the state of nature, that we are neither good nor bad, but what around us impacted us. Now, what's the significance of all of this? Well, the American left derives their thinking and their political philosophy from a Rousseauian view, which, because they believe, and really quick, they believe that in the state of nature, we're good. Therefore, we must change society, not the individual, to then make progress possible.
So what I'm going to do is we're going to go into the lightning round. Now, I realize that you do a radio show where you might have a long format, or certain interviews, podcasts can be long format.
Sorry if I'm going too fast.
No, this is great. This is the lightning round. How it's going to work, unlike Chris Cuomo interviews, I'm not going to cut you off. I'm just going to tee up the premise. I'm going to throw out an idea, and then I'm going to give you about 30 seconds on the clock, or whenever you want to be done, to answer the question, okay? So a wise man once tweeted about an hour ago, any Republican who authorizes a mask mandate or lockdown isn't a Republican and should leave the party immediately. Who said that, and what did they mean?
I did tweet that.
Okay.
And I mean it because, and whether it actually has nothing to do with masks, believe it or not. It has everything to do with the mandate, whether or not it is government's role to come in when the science is very mixed. It is not conclusive. I have a Danish study right here that shows that masks actually hurt people. It was just published yesterday, actually, if I can find it.
And by the way, Charlie, if you go to timetofreeamerica.com later, timetofreeamerica.com, I've interviewed tons of doctors who have tons of studies just like that where they say wearing a mask actually decreases your oxygen level. It causes issues.
Yeah.
It's not good.
And part of liberty is if you believe they work, then so be it. Like that's your own prerogative. But Republicans or conservatives should not use government to infringe on people's natural capacity and liberty to interface with other human beings under shaky science and their own kind of self-serving political objectives. And so anyway, going back to the kind of the more philosophical side of it, that goes back to what rights do you have? Well, you should have the right to your own life, your own decision-making, and your own agency. That's a Lockean view of human nature. That's why the American system is handling these lockdowns different than the European system, right? So John Locke influenced America. Jean-Jacques Rousseau influenced Europe. Now you can see the difference, right? Europeans are much more likely to be servants to government, where we believe that government should be servants to us.
Now, okay, here we go. We're going to get into, this is the part of the show where you can gong me if you want. It's still lightning round, but you can gong me if I say something that's not correct. There's 4 steps to the voting process this election for some reason. Step 1, we all show up to vote, or we mail in our vote, and a Canadian-owned company called Dominion is the hardware. Step 2, the software is Smartmatic, which is a Delaware company owned largely by Venezuelans, communist Venezuelans, who wrote the software for Smartmatic. Step 3, our votes are then shipped to Frankfurt, Germany, to a server. And then step 4, they're counted in Barcelona, Spain, where somebody can switch the votes if they want to, because the Smartmatic software allows them to change the vote. Am I getting something wrong there? I mean, tell me about voter fraud. I want to make sure the listeners hear it direct from you.
No, I think that you got that mostly right. I don't know if the Venezuelans all own Smartmatic. That I have to look into that. But yeah, the bouncing of the data all over the planet is absolutely Right. I mean, this thing flies around more than a Pan Am carrier would have in the 1960s. I mean, our votes are being sent to every continent and every part of the globe, and then we're supposed to act as if they can't be altered. Yeah, look, voter fraud is absolutely real. We've been diving into it more on this program than almost any other. There are still thousands of unanswered questions, data irregularities, voter registration, absentee ballot things, hammer and scorecard, Dominion voting systems, undervoting. How is it that Joe Biden did better in Dane County, Wisconsin than Barack Obama, with the biggest voting center, University of Wisconsin-Madison, being closed? These questions are they're not able to be answered by any people on the Democrat side. And now you have about 50 million people that believe the election is stolen. And unless the Democrats prove otherwise, they are going to have that opinion for years, and that's not a healthy thing for our republic at all.
You know, it's interesting. I'm working with Roger Stone right now on a big document that I'll share with you, and I have 18 pages of cited evidence of voter fraud. We've got people signing affidavits, which are different from accusations, because an affidavit says, if I'm lying to you, that's perjury. I mean, we're talking about legal penalties if you're lying. I've never seen anything like this, but a lot of people are voting for the first time this year because of you. Because of you. I mean this. A lot of people, I know a lot of people, and you're not looking for applause, but I'm giving them to you. A lot of people I know are saying, I voted for the first time. This is my first time. So I am very familiar with what it's like to vote. But a lot of people, this is their first time. They've been apathetic. They've been at Applebee's. They've been at TCBY. They've been watching the NFL. They've been watching NBA. They've been on Netflix. They've been watching The Voice, the masked voice, where the plot really thickens. They've been watching Survivor. And this is the first time they've watched The Choice instead of The Voice. They've watched the election. Can you explain to the listeners out there who voted for the first time how weird this is in comparison to typical elections? Because a lot of people don't know what to compare this to.
Yeah, I mean, we decided to enter the third world in our tabulation of elections. We decided to turn our back on how we usually do elections, where we can call a winner on election night and tabulate all the votes. Now we do this very bizarre thing where we take weeks to try to count votes. And they blame it on mail-in voting, which is just not true. First of all, mail-in voting and absentee balloting is completely ridiculous. It is open to fraud. You don't know who's actually filling in the ballot. You don't know who's actually registering it. There's no oversight. That's why voting in person is the most secure way of voting, both for the voter and for the citizenry at large. And so, yeah, for people that have just voted that aren't really aware of everything that's been going on, this is not normal. This is exactly why we need people to rise up and vote, to try to check this sort of corrupt, cancerous just tradition of getting whatever you want if you're in the ruling class in this country. And so, yeah, look, and my advice for people that voted for the first time is don't be discouraged. You know, please continue to stay involved in the process. Keep voting, keep turning out. I mean, President Donald Trump received 73 million votes, the second most of any person running for office in the history of our country. It's pretty extraordinary.
Unbelievable. Now, you are a guy who organized the President Trump rally in Phoenix, which, by the way, the White House made a mistake. And Hogan Gidley, who's a great guy, he reached out to me, the deputy press secretary, and he said, Clay, can you come to the Tulsa rally and film it? You know, you could that way you could kind of show what's going on. I said, sure. So I'm there. I got my White House press pass on, you know. And at 5:30 in the afternoon, 5:30, early evening, the lower bowl of the BOK Center is completely full. Now, he's not supposed to get up there to speak until 7 o'clock. And I interviewed this guy on the front row, kind of man on the street, and I said, hey, how are you excited to see the president? Where are you from? He says, I'm from St. Louis, and my family's going to come here tonight. We're all going to be here. And he says, do you know why they're not allowed into the arena? And I said, well, what do you mean? He goes, everybody's being turned away. So I start calling my friends who are outside of the arena, and at 5:30 in Tulsa, Oklahoma, the health workers turned away and shut people away so the event would look empty. But I'm telling you, there was at least 3 times as many people who got turned away than were allowed in. And that was at 5:30. And I have video evidence of this. And so I was looking, I'm going, man, that was disappointing. I felt bad for the president, but he rocked the crowd. He brought great energy. But that place would have been full. But the next event, I believe, was the one that you organized in Phoenix.
That's right.
And the energy was incredible. What was it? How would you describe what it was like to interact with the president, our God-loving, America-loving president? I mean, the energy in that place was electric. What was that like?
Yeah, I've gotten to know the president pretty well over the last couple of years. He's incredible. And yeah, we crushed that event. It was awesome.
Yeah.
We had 3,300 students, standing room only, every seat filled. It was incredible. And so, look, the White House gave us an opportunity to host an event, and we took it. And it was an amazing deal. We hope to have him again next month at our Student Action Summit in December. So hopefully we'll be able to do it one more time.
Now, I have a guest with me who's going to ask you a few more questions as well. His name is Vidar Lagarde, and Vidar, he teaches. He's a missionary, and he goes around the world teaching people about Christ and how to start their own churches and grow their own churches. And typically, you would think a missionary would be leaving America to go to other countries. And but right now in California and in many states, we're told we can't worship. We can't sing. Now, the virus is a very tall virus, Charlie. So when we're sitting down at a restaurant, we can take our mask off. But the virus, it's dangerous when you stand up. It's a tall virus. And so at church, people are confused. They're going, my kid could go buy pot. My friend could buy alcohol. My buddy could go to an abortion clinic, but we can't go to church. Do you believe that this COVID-19 government response is a direct attack on the First Amendment and our religious freedoms as Americans?
Of course it is. The left has wanted to get rid of the church for years. I mean, this is just an opportunity for them to do so. The Stalinistic tendencies of the Democrat Party have been wanting to remove faith for quite some time. Now, mind you, the one thing that we get wrong, though, is that we say they want to shut down all the churches. That's not true. They want to shut down the churches that they don't like. They will keep a small select churches that are obedient and compliant, like Andy Stanley, who is a cowardly fool, or like John Piper, who is a cowardly fool. Like, they'll be fine. They'll be invited to the abortion Christmas parties if Biden becomes president. But it is the rebellious Christians. It's the churches that stand out in opposition. And by the way, every church should have opened up their doors immediately back in May.
Yes.
They should have done it in June, July. And if you're still not open, I got no words. I've been saying this for months. It is an absolute disgrace how the American church has proven to be one of the most cowardly institutions in America.
Have you interacted with Sean Foyt, the long-haired praise and worship leader?
Yeah, he's great. Yeah, I actually endorsed him when he ran for Congress.
Okay, well, Sean is a good friend of my business partner, Dr. Zellner, and Brian Gibson, Pastor Brian Gibson. He's working with peaceablygather.com, and it's great to see Sean and Pastor Brian, because they're getting thousands of churches that kind of needed some encouragement early on because they were told that 2.2 million people might die. Now, the average person probably doesn't know the Abdul Latif Jameel Institute. They are the ones who made the models from the UK that said 2.2 million people might die. Those things were off, but we just kept going with the fear. We just kept going with it here. So my final question I want to ask you before I'm going to turn it over to Vidar to ask you a question is, now that we know that 2.2 million people weren't going to die and that Neil Ferguson came out and said, yeah, the models are wrong, did it shock you that the narrative to continue to close kept going, that momentum kept going? Did it shock you, or did you think, hey, we'll be done now that we know the models were wrong?
What has surprised me is, now that the election is over, the Democrats are only intensifying the lockdowns. That's what surprises me, is that I thought it would have been the opposite. I thought after the election they were going to open everything up, and that this was nothing more than a tactic to destroy Trump. It turns out it was more than that. It was both a tactic to destroy Trump and also make America in their image. This is part of their global reset to absolutely break the backbone of private property, middle-class work, the muscular class in our country, private enterprise, the church, faith, and really make us so government-dependent, so state-centric, that any form of America that we once grew up in will soon be demolished and disintegrated. The lockdowns will not stop until we stop them ourselves. I am so incredibly disappointed and stunned, especially with Christians that continue to follow these ridiculous orders. And they say, well, Romans 13. I'm like, go tell me what Romans 13 actually says. Your theology is ridiculous if you think that Romans 13 allows a tyrant to run amok. It does not say that. Who's the sovereign in this country? We are the sovereign. And so when our rights are violated, Romans 13 is being violated by the despots and the dictators. Every Christian and church has a moral obligation to open up in full, no social distancing, no masks, stop listening to these stupid government autocrats, and open up the church.
Now, I have one more question for you. Vidar is going to ask our final question, and then I'll let you kind of tell our listeners the call to action you'd like them to take here. And then I had two things I wanted to share with you offline that I think will blow your mind. So, Vidar, what question do you have here for Mr. Charlie Kirk?
Yeah, I would love to ask, what would you like to see a pastor share from the pulpit with their parishioners and the situation that we're in?
Yeah, I think that a pastor should first and foremost, you know a tree from its fruit, and if a church is not open, then the fruit is cowardice, and that means you have a cowardly pastor. So I've said that every pastor that hasn't opened by August should resign. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that every pastor should explain exactly what Jesus Christ said when he was at Caesarea Philippi. Jesus Christ was famously said, "On this rock build my," and people say church. That is not what he said. According to the Koine Greek, he used a word called ecclesia. And if you actually look into what the original, the roots of what an ecclesia is, an ecclesia was a Greek political gathering of citizens that were looking for the public square welfare of the community they were living in. An ecclesia was gathering around two other big principles, isonomia and eleutheria, which are two Greek words for freedom and equality. Jesus wanted us in the public square. He did not use synagogue. He did not use temple. Every pastor should know the actual Koine Greek that William Tyndale gave us when he was translating the Bible from Greek to English. The first person to do that, as English was the language of the peasants that really never had access to the Bible because of the Latin dominance of the texts for the 1,000+ years prior to that. What's the significance of that? We are called to be involved in government as Christians, not run away from it. Jeremiah, Nehemiah, Esther, Mordecai, Daniel, Joseph is just a short list of Old Testament heroes that were all involved in secular government for God's purpose. And I wish pastors actually said it, but they don't, for two reasons. Number one, most are cowardly. Number two, most are completely confused because they've been fed bad theology from these, seminaries that are been taken over by Marxists.
I will say this, Hebrews 10:25 reads, "Not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together as the manner of some is, but exhorting one another, and so much the more as ye see the day approaching." AKA, never stop going to church. All right. Also, we talk about this in the Declaration of Independence. It reads, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men." Again, government works for us. It's hard to pursue life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness when you're stuck in your house. Charlie, what's your final thing you want to share with the 500,000 Thrive listeners out there? What's the call to action you want them all to take, sir?
Well, would love them to follow our podcast if they're interested. The Charlie Kirk Show. We're doing 2 podcasts a day and 2 hours of radio a day. And look, this is a republic if we can keep it. If they end up winning, Biden ended up winning, it'll be because of the church. Evangelical support eroded for Donald Trump just enough to be able to get Joe Biden a little bit of a lift. And this is on Andy Stanley and John Piper and any pastor that did not give a sermon telling their congregation to vote for Donald Trump. They'll have to explain to their creator the 1 million abortions a year, turning their back on Israel, and the disintegration of the greatest country ever to exist in the history of the world. It's that clear. You have one party that embraces the absolute slaughter of the innocent, the destruction of the West, and this beautiful gift that we have been given. And if we lose, it'll be because of Christians. And I saw it. I did over 100 speeches over the last I spoke all across the country, churches. I was trying my best to reinvigorate the American church. But then you had John Piper and Andy Stanley and some of these fools and cowards speak out. If my language is a little harsh for people, well, that's too bad, because we're about to hand the keys to the kingdom over to a movement that people have no idea what they're dealing with. This agenda from Joe Biden, if he takes power and we're not able to overturn these election results, which I pray we will be, but it's to be determined right now, they are going to usher in something that we are not prepared for. And Christians will have to now reap the fruit of being not involved in the ecclesia. We did church for the last 40 years. The left did ecclesia. And now you get to see exactly what happens when we're not involved.
Charlie, thank you for being here so much. And I have a few things I want to share with you off air.
Okay.
And now, without any further ado, 3, 2, 1, boom!
If I lived in China or even Russia or any totalitarian country, maybe I could understand some of these illegal injunctions. Maybe I could understand the denial of certain basic First Amendment privileges because they haven't committed themselves to that over there. But somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech. Somewhere I read of the freedom of press. So just as I say, we aren't going to let any dogs or water hoses turn us around,
or die. Trying to stay up in the middle, man, that's suicide. Be hot or be cold, what's it gonna be? Support me with loyalty is all I wanna see. If you ain't saying nothing, then you saying something. What you see is what you get, man, I ain't never frontin'. I see your problem, I'm lazy, cause I ain't never running. Opposition passing it off, cause they ain't never won it. Come on, time to say goodbye, it is you and I.
When you compromise, it will multiply.
We ain't never scared to put it on the line.
It's time to pick a side, it's do or die.
Time to pick a side, homie, do or die.
When you compromise, it will multiply.
We ain't never scared to put it on the line.
It's time to pick a side, it's do or die. No mess, no backs for me. Both middle fingers up for talk about G. I'm never gonna listen to his latest pitch or the scarf queen. His Dr. Brooks is up. I'm an American with the First Amendment and the Second Amendment to defend it. You want our guns? Well, come and take it. Hope you're good at dodging bullets and you're praying. The year 2020, the year of perfect vision. The time where you and I have to make a decision. Open up your minds like Hunter's laptop. But when you see corruption, this time it's gotta stop. Back the police, say no to the beast. No to the mask, take no vaccine. Back the police, say no to the beast. No to the mask, take no vaccine.
Time to say goodbye, it is you and I.
When you compromise, it will multiply.
We ain't never scared to put it on the line.
It's time to pick a side, it's do or die.
Time to pick a side, homie, do or die.
When you compromise, it will multiply.
We ain't never scared to put it on the line.
It's time to pick a side, it's do or die.
If you compromise, it'll multiply. Treat you like a doormat, treat you speak your mind. Ain't hard to find, you must be blind if you can't see the sign. I got a spine, I won't never let them take what's mine. Time to unify, I'm talking you and I. If you ain't riding for the cause, better move aside. Sit back, watch me work, I'ma do it right. Time for you to pick a side, it's looking like a do or die. Time to say goodbye, it is you and I.
When you compromise, it will multiply.
We ain't never scared to put it on the line.
It's time to pick a side, it's do or die.
Time to pick a side, homie, do or die.
When you compromise, it will multiply.
We ain't never scared to put it on the line.
It's time to pick a side, it's do or die.
Our country will never be a socialist country. We're not going to let it happen.
And that is another lyrical miracle on the Thrive Time Show.